Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of LA Roundtable. I'm Dave Bryan, the moderator and host of the Roundtable and political reporter at CBS 2 and KCAL 9 TV. Today on the Roundtable, we're talking about the LA City Council. You know, after the most recent election, we had a big turnover in council members. And today we have two of the newer members of the City Council who just passed their first 100 days on the council. We'll talk to them about their thoughts and ideas about what LA needs, what the big problems are, and how to solve them. We've got two great guests to talk about that. First of all, Councilman Mitch O'Farrell from Hollywood. He represents the 13th District. And Councilman Felipe Fuentes from the 7th District, which includes Sunland, Tujunga, Sylmar, Mission Hills, North Hills, and Lakeview Terrace. Well, welcome to both of you. First of all, thanks very much for taking the time out to be with us.
Thank you, Dave.
What do you think now? The first 100 days are over. You going to stay on the job, or are you calling it you had enough?
I think
Anybody?
I think we're just getting started. That's how I feel. It's just the beginning of what will be a great 4 years.
What are your thoughts about it?
Well, it's been a whirlwind, and it's been really exciting to partner with so many new people on the city family. And it's going to be, I think, a really, really important improvement to the city. Not to say that it was bad before, but you've got a lot of folks who have served as staff, who've understood Los Angeles, and who are fresh from the campaign trail, I think really in touch with what the city needs.
You know, Felipe, especially in your case, because you had been in Sacramento. You've been in City Hall before. It's not your first rodeo, but you also spent some time in Sacramento in the state legislature. And, you know, it's fortunately or unfortunately, when you're in Sacramento, you're kind of invisible here. I mean, there's not enough news coverage. You know, we don't really get, like we used to, direct reporting on what our assembly member, Senate member are up to, what bills they're involved in. So this seems to me is kind of a different situation, a different experience being here in LA.
It really is, and as you mentioned, you know, I was staff like Mitch. I was staff to a council office, and I worked in the mayor's office. And coming back to Los Angeles with so many of my colleagues who have served in the legislature, for better or for worse, you're right, didn't get the notoriety of some of the work that we're doing. But now, as the city is thinking about what the city of Los Angeles needs to do moving forward and how to position ourselves with good legislation, with our fair share from Sacramento, I think we've got the brain power around the horseshoe now to be able to be more effective.
Mitch, what's the number one issue in your district? I think I could probably guess what it is, but I'm going to wait to have you tell me.
Well, I know that Hollywood takes up a lot of the oxygen in the 13th District in terms of its notoriety and the attention it gets. But actually, it's only one of 12 very distinct neighborhoods in the 13th. So even though it gets most of the attention, my focus is really spread across the district. And I would say one of my main areas of focus is revitalizing the Los Angeles River. And I'm very glad and appreciative that I was appointed chair of Arts, Parks, Health, and Aging because the river, the Ad Hoc River Committee, was folded into that. So I've spent 12 years while on staff of then Councilmember Garcetti, now mayor, as his river deputy, more or less. So I bring some institutional knowledge there, and then the larger focus is just on our parks, our open spaces, and quality of life. So I would say I'm focused really in our urban core neighborhoods: Silver Lake, Echo Park, Atwater Village, some of our challenged areas in the underserved parts of the 13th that are traditionally underserved, which is the Temple, Botry, historic Filipino town areas. So Hollywood looms large for all of us. It belongs to all of us. It's not just a 13th District neighborhood. It is one of the city's premier neighborhoods. So that's my perspective on that.
Which river plan? The Corps of Engineers now is facing a number of different options, from, you know, the sort of cheap option to you know, all the bells and whistles, right? Where do you stand on that?
Alternative 20, all the way. And there were 4 alternatives that were put forward by the Army Corps of Engineers some time back, and the public comment period has been ongoing since that time for a couple of months now. And Alternative 20, how could I explain it in the shortest amount of time? It is the alternative that has had the greatest level of study, the greatest level of diligence by engineer professionals for the better part of the last decade, and then 30 years of awareness, activism, and expertise that's been gained at the Los Angeles River. And the alternatives, the 4 alternatives that were put forward, were already winnowed down from much larger possibilities. So we all stand together, all electeds in the city of LA, and we're taking the message to Washington, D.C. next week. And that is the one that will again, help our most underserved neighborhoods from downtown through Griffith Park. A quarter of the city's population is within 1/2 mile of the river from the valley all the way to San Pedro. So we have a great opportunity, a great revitalization effort. Alternative 20, it's the biggest price tag, but it's the most cost effective as well.
And who makes the final call on that?
It will be Washington,
Okay.
Army Corps of Engineers, but we hope to have a bit of help from the Obama White House too.
Okay. And same question, Felipe. In your district, what is the #1 issue?
Well, I think Mitch hit it right on the head. I mean, there's a larger conversation in Los Angeles about sustainability, whether it's making sure that our local economies are sustainable and we foster really good growth with different sectors like Hollywood, like film, or manufacturing, or we're being more mindful about all of the precious resources that Los Angeles has. You know, Mitch speaks an awful lot about the river, and that's incredibly important because Los Angeles really isn't taking its place on the water conversation statewide, and a lot of this is going to really come to a head, I think, in the coming years, whether it's the Bay Delta Conservation Plan, whether it's the stormwater mitigation fees that we're talking about. We have to be smarter and more sustainable citywide.
Let's talk about jobs in the economy, because the unemployment rate in Los Angeles, last time I checked, was still double figures, which is considerably higher than the national rate, even the state unemployment rate. So why has LA not been able to create more jobs and not sort of benefited as much as other areas in our country from the recovery, slow as it is?
Well, you know, I think the adage about California sneezing and the rest of the country catching a cold really rings true. Having served in the legislature in the worst economic climate in state history, there's a lot that we have to do to be able to sort of get out of the woods here. And Los Angeles really is a complex system. I mean, you've got a lot of urban areas like Mr. O'Farrell's district and the southern part of the city, and then areas that are very rural that used to have manufacturing opportunities and agriculture. And so trying to weave together a comprehensive economic development strategy that makes it so that we get out of the way when we need to, but also incent capital when we have to, is very difficult.
Mitch, are there specific industries that need to be focused on, either brought in, like high tech, or maintained, like the runaway production? I mean, you know, what isn't being done that needs to be done?
I think what my colleague just mentioned, Mr. Felipe's mentioned, sometimes we have to get out of the way, but sometimes we have to lead. So I am part of this freshman class, I think, of leaders that are very interested in fostering what we have. Entrepreneurs are alive and well and thriving in Los Angeles. We need to make sure that our business practices at City Hall can match that and encourage that and foster that kind of growth. We absolutely will proactively bring more businesses in, more industry. Los Angeles still has a very strong manufacturing base. We still have a very strong entertainment industry, and they all want to stay here, but we have to devise the policies that will allow them to flourish more, and we can do that, and we will. And I think that if someone looked at the numbers of Los Angeles, the unemployment numbers, the economic growth numbers, in a snapshot, one would think that the recovery has left us behind. But I think the signs are there that we're on our way up. We just have to make sure that our focus is spread evenly throughout the city and that our policies benefit everyone, not any one neighborhood, not any one district. And that's what I'm terribly interested in working with my colleagues to put forward.
You know, the criticism of the leadership in LA, see, the good thing for you guys is you're new, right? So it's like you start with a clean slate. But the criticism has been that the economy in Los Angeles has not been diverse enough, that it was too dependent on entertainment, the port, and development. And they are highly, or were, as it proven, you know, highly vulnerable to the recession, and really suffered. The city suffered in an outsized way because of the fact that the economy wasn't diverse enough. What do you do to address that problem?
Well, I think the criticism is absolutely fair. I mean, I think what we need to do, you know, since 2008, since this Great Recession, we have gone into a mode of stabilization, trying to figure out how to retain those very valuable enterprises that are in the city of Los Angeles. And Mr. O'Farrell, you know, needs to be commended because he's introduced a motion recently that was approved by the council that's actually going to help us keep some of that runaway production, some of those enterprises that are really critical to stabilizing our our local economy. But moving forward, we've got to be smarter and more innovative about trying to attract capital to diversify those revenue streams. And then to the point that we made earlier about trying to get out of the way, we've had the conversation, for example, about gross receipts sales tax and the burden that is on small and medium business now for years without any real resolution. A couple of exemptions here and there, but we've got to really be a lot smarter about it. And I'm very, very excited about serving with people like Mitch and the rest of my colleagues who bring this expertise in, ideally from Sacramento, lessons learned, but with real roots in Los Angeles to try to move us forward.
The other issue that I hear most often is city services. I mean, there are some people out there feel that the city government has completely lost touch with providing services. The roads, we all saw in a recent report, the streets are supposed to be in the worst repair of any city in America, I think. The trees look like they haven't been trimmed in 100 years in many places, and the list seems to go on and on. What are you going to do to address that?
I think there are some good signs, excuse me, some good signs on the horizon. For the first time in anyone's memory, or at least a generation, we have a balanced budget at the state level. Our receipts are increasing. We are about to deal with the budget season for fiscal 14-15 in the coming months. So it will be up to us to do the heavy lifting, make the tough decisions that will enable a greater delivery of services to all of our neighborhoods. And I also just want to put out there that, you know, we came out of this Great Recession, and a year ago, as recently as a year ago, bankruptcy was being bandied about as a possibility for the city of Los Angeles. That's no longer part of the discussion. So I think that we've come out of that, and I think we're coming out of it. But again, we will have to deal with moving things forward in such a way that we can once again trim our trees, resurface our streets, and we've got some exciting things happening. Our colleagues Mitch Englander and Joe Buscaino put together this wonderful report. They've done their diligence about this possible bond moving forward to once and for all stop putting off these necessary infrastructure repairs. There will be more to process and more decision making related to that proposal, but that's an example of some of the activity that's happening on the City Council to think outside that proverbial box, to get things moving again, and to make sure that the justification is out there so that our residents, voters, constituents will have faith that it's the right way to move forward, and that's what we're going to do.
Now, you're talking about the proposed ballot initiative to fix the sidewalks. I mean, right? Is that
the streets, mostly, but sidewalks are in the mix now.
And I think we're talking, it's a multi-billion-dollar proposal, is that right? Yeah.
Well, so I should say the most recent conversation is it's a $3 billion Save Our Streets initiative that's being talked about. It's still yet to be deliberated in terms of what the actual package will be and what we'll put before the voters. But I think Mitch hit it right on the head. We have an opportunity in this next budget season to begin talking about restoration. Unfortunately, in government, we've talked about cuts now since 2008. And prior to that, we've been in a deferred maintenance mode where we haven't been keeping par with the essential city services or our infrastructure. I mean, look at the conversations that we have around DWP, water, and rate hikes. They always are very difficult and have been even more so in recent times. So moving forward, I think we're going to have to be really sort of intelligent about what we do in government, maybe even taking a chapter out of some of the things that we've done in the state government most recently with realigning services, trying to figure out how to consolidate operations in different agencies so that we have a more streamlined process. It's going to have to be that kind of innovative approach to wring every single drop out of the precious towel here of taxpayer dollars to make sure that we're getting the most bang for our buck. And certainly, that's got to be done before we actually go to the voters and ask for more assistance.
But you know some of the voters are going to say, wait a minute, I thought I was paying taxes to have the streets repaired and the sidewalks repaired. Now another $3 billion?
Let me tell you that, again, I think we're far from getting to the final package. but Los Angeles has had a rich history. You know, both Mitch and I, when we were staff, had a chance to work on Proposition O, where the voters gave us a $500 million authority to deal with water issues and contamination and infrastructure. And that was a difficult sell, but it made the ballot. It was passed by the voters by over 66%, and we got that authority. We have to figure out how to tell that story, but we have to demonstrate to our voters, the taxpayer, and our constituents that we've done all that we can in order to get the best deal for them. And I think we're on our way to doing that.
I mean, there's no doubt that you know that it's high on the list of priorities for everyone who lives in LA. But the price tag is pretty high.
Right.
I think it's a hard sell.
But as Felipe just mentioned, we're far from the final decisions. What I'm talking about is the out-of-box thinking, the proposals that we're bringing forward that will be thoroughly vetted. But I got to say, sometimes government gets things really right. Felipe just mentioned Prop O. We just rededicated Echo Park Lake. That was a $45 million renovation. We saved $20 million. Government got that right, and it's a wonderful new park. It went through years of process and diligence, and the construction period was short, it was precise, and it saved money. So as long as we can demonstrate that government can get things right, as long as we can demonstrate that all diligence was done before a proposal is ever brought to the voters, it's up to us to make sure that we do our diligence so that voters have confidence that what we're doing is the right thing. And as you mentioned, people talk about it in all of our neighborhoods everywhere we go. We will figure out what the best package to present is. I'm confident that we'll get there, and I think that voters with this recent election, first of all, we're eager to move things along in Los Angeles and think differently and think outside that proverbial box, as I mentioned before. I also think that voters, Angelenos, expect that of us. So it's an exciting time. It's an exciting time to be in office in Los Angeles, working with each other on the city council, working with our city attorney, our new controller, our mayor. We have the enthusiasm amongst one another, and then we have the expectation from the electorate, and so I think there's a great alignment right now.
Felipe, you've been in the state legislature, you've worked in City Hall before, now as a member of the City Council. Does the City Council work?
You know, it does, and I got to tell you, it was evidenced most recently, just as soon as recent as yesterday, with a conversation that we had that dealt with how taxi cabs and transportation network carriers work or don't work in the city of Los Angeles. But I think the real excitement here that Mitch is, talking about, and that I'm really eager to be a part of, is that we have tremendous turnover in city government for the first time in a long time. A new mayor, a new city attorney, a new controller, 6 new council members, a lot of folks with experience as staff, lots of folks of experience as former legislators. There is a real opportunity for Los Angeles to pivot and move towards the future. And I think there's a real expectation by the voters to do the same, which I think is really healthy for all of us to remember.
You know, one of the concerns of some, observers of the council is that with the 6 new members, many of whom were in the state legislature, that we're now seeing the sort of Sacramentoization of the LA City Council. And they argue that Sacramento is a different animal. It works in a different way. A lot of party line votes, a lot of special interests swirling around. You're there temporarily. The turnover is pretty fast. Is some of that a problem in the council? I'd like to enter
into this because I am someone who has no Sacramento experience whatsoever. I'm one of the local guys who was privileged enough to work on behalf of a council member for all those years, and I understand local issues, local politics, and so I feel nothing but the benefit of experience from my Sacramento colleagues, and most of whom had city experience before going to Sacramento. So I think that we're all the beneficiary of that experience. Someone like Felipe, who worked, as he mentioned, for the mayor, then an elected official, then he became an elected official and spent 6 years in the assembly. Well, now he's back being a Los Angeles City Council member. He's got the local experience and the state experience to bring to bear for Los Angeles. So I think we have a great mix. We have our new colleague, Nuri Martinez, who was on the school board here. She doesn't come from Sacramento either. We've got Mike Bonin, others. So we have a really great mix. It's a really nice formula that somehow came together. Maybe the stars aligned, but I think that we all learn a lot from one another, and we respect one another's points of view. But I think that experience, I would argue that experience is actually helping.
Well, see, your colleague jumped in and...
Well, let me say that the opportunity for us here in Los Angeles is to really marshal all of those experiences, the expertise, and really move the Los Angeles delegation in Sacramento. I mean, we know that we get short shrift from Washington, D.C., and we get it from Sacramento, and there is really no excuse for not being able to wield more power where all of the decisions that impact the city of Los Angeles, the biggest city in the state, it's a real opportunity for us, and I'm excited. I mean, you have a former speaker, you've got a former appropriations chair, you've got a lot of experts in different areas that really need to deliver the bacon for Los Angeles.
You know, I'm sort of hopscotching around here a little bit, but I want to ask you because I thought that you had, going back now to this the possible ballot proposition on repairing the streets and sidewalks. And I was thinking that you had said or put in the idea that, you know, that fixing the sidewalks is a city responsibility and should not be foisted off on the homeowners. So how does that fit in with the direction the council is going now?
Well, I think, you know, we're trying to underscore the point here that sometimes change, most times it's really good for local electeds and for government. And, you know, it was just about 3 years ago when the city of Los Angeles, prior to Mitch and I joining, that the city and the Public Works Commission were actually considering shifting the liability of sidewalk repair. And we know that the majority of sidewalks in Los Angeles are in utter disrepair. There was a real consideration of moving that liability onto the property owner.
I thought that had already been done, actually. I mean, some council members were saying, no, it's the homeowner's responsibility.
They were saying that, and so what I did is I introduced legislation in Sacramento, managed to earn all of the no support of the mayor or the council at the time, because I said, no, you can't do that unless
Mayor Villaraigosa.
Mayor Villaraigosa and the previous council. And the legislation didn't pass, but it underscored the point that since 1974, that responsibility has fallen on the city of Los Angeles, and how can they all of a sudden shift that to the property owner? The response back was, we'll scrap that idea, we'll do a 3-year study, it's going to cost $10 million, still a very frustrating response, but I think it helps underscore the fact that we need to satisfy the concerns and the service needs of our constituents, and the infrastructure, the deferred maintenance of the infrastructure is something that has to be on the top of our priority list.
It does.
So you feel that your position that it's not the homeowner's responsibility to fix their sidewalk. I mean, you still feel that way, right? I mean, that's,
absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it
and
belongs to the
that's
city.
not inconsistent with the ballot proposition.
No, and so the proposition is still very much in the nascent stages. They're talking about all of the deferred maintenance as it relates to streets. That includes curb, gutter, the repaving of streets. And so the question becomes, what's going to be the right mix of services that we're going to go and ask for support from the voters in order to finance? But before we get there, I think it's really important that all of us make the case, and we have to demonstrate through this next budget process that we are doing the best that we can, and only then can we go ahead and ask the voters for their additional tax dollars.
I will say that our biggest test is coming, and that is, you know, we're emerging from the Great Recession, and our receipts are, you know, revenues increasing. So the challenge will be now how we deal with this next budget season, so that we don't do anything to endanger the possibility of slipping back. So the tough decisions will have to be made. We'll work very closely together with our budget committee and with the mayor, and we will hammer out a budget that makes the most sense and serves the greater good, that's prioritized in a way that provides the greatest level of services that our constituents expect and deserve.
So switching topics again now, and we're running out of time, which you'll be happy to know, I think, when you hear the question. There have been 2 cases recently that have come to public attention, where one where a council member, one where a staff member are accused of sexual harassment. Now there's been a plan put forward that the education and sort of training in this area should be expanded in city government and in the council among staff people and everyone else. Do you agree with that? Do you think that should be done, needs to be done?
Absolutely.
Yes.
I mean, you know, Mitch and I were both staff in council offices for many years, and I remember vividly, you know, you do the yearly training on workplace harassment, whether it's sexual or hostility, all those issues. And a motion was just introduced by our council president and Councilwoman Nuri Martinez, the only woman on the council, to address that. Now, there's going to be some cost associated with that. I think that we need to make sure that we continue the training that we do. We need to make it more robust. But I think when it comes to folks who are in decision-making positions, elected officials, whether it's Mitch and I or anybody else, we probably need to go through some additional sort of training just so that people are clear that this is a real priority for all of the council members and all of the elected officials. As soon as I heard about the issues that were taking place, I made sure that my staff was in queue to make sure that they were getting the training that they need, including myself.
Is the environment there that when someone feels harassed that they should report it? Is there an openness about it, or is it hush-hush?
There certainly is in my office, and you just heard Felipe. I mean, we take this very seriously, and I absolutely think that elected officials should have the same training that everyone else has. We are held to a higher standard. That's a fact of life, and that's something that we signed up for. So I fully support our colleagues Herb and Nuri on this one, and it's just good. We want to provide a harassment-free environment for all city workers, period, and that goes for our staff as well. We should not be held to a different standard. And as I said, we're held to a higher standard, if anything, and that's what we signed up for. So I think it's a step in the right direction.
Hey, thanks to you, both of you, very much. I really appreciate it. We covered a lot of ground in a short period of time. There's a lot more to talk about, but our time is up.
Certainly. Thanks.
We hope that you enjoyed watching, and maybe you learned something about the City Council and how things are working, maybe even about getting your streets and sidewalks repaired. From all of us here at LA Roundtable, so long for now.